when you look at things like Confucius and some of those Eastern philosophers and stuff like that. There's so much that is passed down to them. And then so much of the history we have is because something fantastic enough that Welcome to another episode of the Joe and Doug Show. It is Thursday afternoon. It is still warm in Youngstown. Thank God. Sun has stayed out. It's supposed to rain tomorrow, I think, but Saturday's supposed to be nice.
Our AC was out earlier today, and it warmed up to. Remember, you said that it got warm in here.
Oh, I felt it. But as soon as I came in,
but it's been out all day, and it's good now compared to what it was earlier. It was like 1,000 degrees in here.
If we're not careful, we'll end up doing a striptease show, you know.
It's G here for now.
People will be sending us dollars to keep them on. You know, we can raise a lot of money, Joe. Oh no, that's good. Well, this is the show where we want to help you become the best version of yourself. We talk all things life, leadership, and one of the conversations you and I have been having lately. On an organizational level, on a personal level, and you're really feeling like this nudge, this calling to help teach people to think and be wealthy.
Yes.
And you've had this in your heart for a while, and I know you've dropped little breadcrumbs and little nuggets along the way as you and I've had conversations. We've also begun looking at some stuff organizationally, some projects and different things. And I often tell people who have a business at church or somebody that comes to me for work, oh, you should really talk to Joe. I said, he's going to think differently than you've heard any other, investor, business partner, entrepreneur think. There's some principles that are true that you may see some crossover in, but I genuinely enjoy your take on just the idea of wealth, manifesting money, all of that sort of stuff. So I thought for today's show we could talk a bit around the idea of training ourselves to think and be wealthy.
Yes, that's a good topic. I think everybody can benefit from that.
Absolutely.
Everybody in our audience will become wealthy if you listen to the show. You become wealthy. Yes. You have no choice but to become wealthy if you are around these principles long enough.
So let's start with this, right? So everyone comes to the table with a basic level of financial knowledge, right? We know how to balance a checkbook. Most of us know how to go into debt. We all have a basic level of financial knowledge, good, bad, or otherwise. For the average person listening to this, most people are living paycheck to paycheck. Most people are carrying $10,000 to $20,000 worth of credit card debt. Most people have some sort of long-term debt. Most people are barely surviving. Yes. And so when they hear a show like this, topic, you're going to teach me how to be wealthy. It's some MLM or some get-rich-quick
Just send me $10,
right?
And you'll be wealthy.
Yeah, it's something.
I'll teach you how.
Something stupid like that. We're going to sell you a class or whatever. But it really is simpler than that. Yeah. And the more you and I talk about it, the more I realize, like, well, duh. If you want that sort of thing, you're going to have to think this way, and you're going to have to respond this way, and you're going to have to act this way, and it all goes together. And while it's simpler, it requires consistency, and it's going to require some change in mindsets and thought process.
Well, let me build a stage here for you, because this is the strangest things. I talked to thousands of people about this topic, and I can't say literally, but almost everyone goes through and has the same response, the same reaction. And so that you say, well, everybody's living paycheck to paycheck. Well, everybody's in this position. We follow this theme. Like, what puts us all in the exact same thing? You could take someone in California and say, hey, buddy, you living paycheck to paycheck. And he'd be like, yeah, how about you? And what about us all makes us gravitate naturally to the things that are the most disastrous for our happiness?
Well, I think some of it is systemic. Some of it's designed that way. The world around us, and I'm not necessarily talking about the natural laws, but the socioeconomic system, the political system, the media, entertainment. It's all designed to keep you at a certain level. It's not designed to help you elevate. There's opportunities to elevate. There's opportunities to grow. But for the most part, things are programmed in. You grew up where you grew up.
For sure.
You were nurtured into certain things. My mom and dad lived a certain way and had a certain lifestyle. They thought certain things were expensive. So you grow up saying, wow, that's expensive. And then you get around other people and you're like, well, they don't think that's expensive. Maybe my definition of that word, for instance, needs to change.
And that's one of the first things when you and I talked. I said, your vocabulary's got to shift. You got to say things differently. Not only say different words, but you have to say them differently so that they don't have an emotional impact on you.
So what, give our audience, what are 4 or 5 phrases that a lot of people say when it comes to money that is absolutely killing them, and what are the tweaks they need to make?
Okay, so the first one is everybody's has a really good familiarity with what I call FUD. Okay. Fear, uncertainty, and doubt. And this trio, kind of, they live together. And I could say, hey, look, we're going to go on a picnic, right? And we are programmed to scan the horizon to see if there's any danger or a reason why that's not going to happen. So you have those people who are like, it's going to rain, or there's going to be ants, or the bees are going to sting us, or the foods are expensive, and a million reason why you shouldn't do it. And I'm like, okay, let's do it anyway, you know? And once you start kind of like not being guided by the fear, uncertainty, you can still have it. I mean, if you want to keep them around as pals, that's fine, right? But as long as you don't act on them, as long as they don't let them, like minimize a dream, like, hey, I want to buy a mansion one day. Like, why are you not going to buy a mansion? Blah, 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 right? So, a lot of times we don't want to keep the guy around that constantly shoots down our ideas, but we got that guy living inside of our head all the time that does the same thing.
Yeah. So we got to send him packing. And there are some key phrases. I know you and I talk a lot about vocabulary, and it seems nuanced, but the Bible says you have the power of life and death in your mouth. So the way that you choose to speak about some things, James chapter 3 says, the tongue is the smallest muscle in the body, but it has the greatest control over the direction of someone's life. Talks about how, a small rudder controls the direction of a ship, and we put bits in the mouths of horses and we can turn the whole animal in the same way. The tongue controls the direction of a man, type deal. And so we talk about the importance of vocabulary. So what are some phrases that Joe doesn't say? And what are some phrases that you have chosen to start saying?
So I will say things I want to say, I'll say through my head first, and I'll make sure that they're phrased correctly. And there are things like impossible, like there's no such thing as that in my vocabulary. Anything that ends in NT, can't, won't, shouldn't, all of those are gone. Because if you're saying something, part of our process is we program our subconscious mind, and our subconscious mind is very almost like a caveman, and it doesn't understand like the nuances of language that makes it nice and sophisticated and articulate. It just knows, house bad, that kind of a thing. So it's not going to take the time to realize that you meant you didn't want something. It's going to just say, house on fire, and that's what's going to go with, and that programming is going to be sort of poisoned if you speak like that.
So the negative side of the spectrum, can't, won't, shouldn't, all the nots. My dad used to say growing up, can't means won't, and what he was trying to drive home is that it's not that you cannot, it's that you're choosing not to, you're willing yourself not to. And so everything's possible, that idea of impossible. I think it's Paul Coelho says something along the line of impossible is just somebody's opinion. And I think that's a really neat kind of quote to it. But when it comes to finance, one of the hurdles I know for me that I had, my parents went through a bankruptcy and we lost a house, and we went through a foreclosure, and I didn't realize, you kind of grow up in that, you don't realize quite where you're at. And I watched, dad struggle. I watched mom struggle. I watched unemployment. I remember helping take out the food stamp booklets and all of that, type deal for a season. Now, I've also watched my mom work her tail off and get her college. I graduated college in 2007. My mom graduated in 2008. I watched her work from becoming a secretary to the CFO at a law firm, and I watched her, put in the work to get to where she's at today. And quite honestly, it's inspiring now looking back, but growing up, what I was raised in was, well, we don't have money for that. We can't afford that. Everything was in the negative. Now, my parents did their best to make sure that we could play sports and do some of the normal things, but we did not, we're not well off, if that makes sense. And so some of that fed into adulthood for me, and I have to challenge that status quo in my brain. The idea of seeing 10 or 20 or 30 or $100,000 in a savings account is foreign to me. And so training my brain and training my language to say, hey, that's who I am. Yes, that's not who I was, but it's who I am and who I'm becoming. So what sort of things can people do to start training their subconscious, training their mind to think differently about finances, wealth, etc.
So I bring this third-party perspective guy out all the time, and I sometimes give him a fun name. But through the eyes of a person that's not you, you get your best perspective. So we'll use an alien, right?
Okay.
So now we're gonna bring an alien into this from wherever, and he landed here, and now you have to bring him up to your banking your checking account, right? Log him in, and I need you to convince him that stuff there is something he really wants and it's super valuable, and he'd willing to kill somebody over, right? Good luck with that, right? Because in order to have value in what's sitting in your account, you have to participate in all of the faculties that civilization presents it. If you decide not to do those things, if you just disconnect from a lot of those things, then you can light those things on fire, because it literally is a piece of paper. This is why I say, hey, Mr. Alien, this is a piece of paper where human beings are really dumb, so we assign value to it, and then as long as everybody assigns value to it, then it's really valuable, and they'll do weird things for it. And he's going to say, that's kind of stupid. Let's do intrinsic value stuff, thing that is really valuable. Like, okay, Mr. Alien, what's really valuable? Things that I eat. If I don't eat, I die, right? Water is things to sustain. A family, because I need to procreate and make more of myself. A shelter. And then he'll go through the things that's everything except for money.
Yeah. So
that was the diatribe.
That was good. but that leads me back to those definitions. When we say words like expensive, are we giving too much value to money or too little?
Expensive? No, it's just an attitude towards it. If you believe that there's an infinite supply of money, there's no such thing as expensive. Now, there is limitations of what you're willing to do to have that thing. So
is the juice worth the squeeze?
Exactly.
Sure. Yeah, I don't want to spend, $400 on a, $2 thing from the dollar store. That's dumb. But it's in that value system that you're talking about when we put money up on this pedestal, it ends up controlling us. But what you're saying is, I can get it anywhere, so I devalue it to a place where it's a tool, it's a resource, it's not the source, it's not the one thing I'm after.
So here's what you're going to do. Take money and bring it down to about 25% of the level that it needs. Right now, in most people's world, it's 100%.
Everybody thinks about all the time, how am I going to pay my bills?
But there's four things,
right?
All right? You got money, now it's 25% of the total equation. Infinite, I don't even really value it. Easiest to get, easiest to spend, constantly replenishing. The second one is time. Right? You expense your time. You have so much of it in a day. You get to allocate for certain things, make priorities important to you. You go do stuff, right? Again, pretty infinite. You got a lot of it out there. So again, I don't even trade in that. I always have enough that I always have as much as I need. The next two are the ones you really have to fight to make sure that you have enough of, because they are the most valuable. Number one is relationships. And how you connect in with other people. We are built for it, and we have to earn it, and it's not something that's granted to us. It's not infinite. You make those things. And the fourth one is energy. So 25%, 25%, 25%, 25%. Energy, you got to know if you're expensing all your energy being mad at somebody because of something did in the political world, then you're like, I'm so tired. Like, what did that energy buy you? You're the dumbest energy spender that I've freaking ever saw in my life. But if you divide it out and like you're spending your energy consciously and you're spending your relationships consciously, then time and money kind of take care of themselves.
Yeah. And it's interesting, you mentioned relationships, and I've never seen a poor person that has really good relationships. Because when you have a good relationship, one of the running jokes on our board at the church, we run into an issue, we'll say, hey, here's the problem, this is the solution, we could pay X, Y, and Z, to do that. But somebody will be like, no, I got a guy. I know somebody, right? So-and-so does this, let's give them a call, I bet they'd help us out, et cetera, et cetera. And those relationships are not just monetarily valuable, those relationships are huge. I even think for, Sam and I, when we have, a crisis or we have something that comes into our world, I think of the 2 or 3 people I can immediately pick up the phone, and I know they'll drop everything and be on my doorstep. How can we serve you? And I do that for a lot of people in what I do as pastor. Somebody passes away, I'm there, as soon as the family, allows it. And so relationships are a really big key. Energy as well. And so you're saying all of those contribute to the idea of wealth. So let's define wealth then, because when we started the show, everybody thought that they were about to make a lot of money.
Yes.
How do you define wealth?
All right, so there's a tipping point where you live a life that you live a life for 2 ways. Either in your everyday pursuits, you create a negative number, or your everyday pursuits you're at a positive number. Okay. And you can basically go to the end of your day and add up everything that happened during that day. And you could really feel whether or not you had a day that was a more positive day. And it's not positive as in, let's all be chipper and cheery and sing Kumbaya. Positive to me is that you had more positive events that were more fulfilling and you poured more stuff into more of your environments. And then you basically get fruit from that somewhere down the line. You do that long enough and everywhere you go, fruit, fruit. If you do the other side, then you plant deficits. So everywhere you go, you're like, oh, the checking account, there's a deficit. Relationships, I gotta do something there. There's a deficit. Everywhere you go, you're pouring stuff into it, but there's no fruit. You're filling in a hole, and then you're bringing it up to zero again. And just being at zero is not fulfilling.
Yeah, no, that's really good. So wealth for our conversation, what we're talking about, encompasses a holistic approach. We're not just talking about financial freedom. We're not just talking about having 6 zeros in a bank account somewhere. We're talking, energy, relationships, time, spending our lives in a way that makes us wealthy. It's how
I can guarantee if you have a deficiency in wealth, in finances, money, it's because of one of the other three. Could almost guarantee it.
Interesting. Extrapolate on that.
So if you, so you have, an energy problem, right? Basically, when you pour your soul into something, you feel like doing stuff. That is the energy.
Yeah.
You come into it with gusto. No one's going to talk you out of doing it, right? Some of the poorest people are like the most tired people all the time. They don't feel like doing anything. If you ask them to do it, they'd be like, you know what? Lots of shit to do, you know?
I don't have time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, but if that person put in, I don't care about time, I don't care about money, I'm going to just work on saying yes to thing and being in on things, right?
Yeah.
And then you build up that capacity to be able to do stuff and not stop because you don't feel like doing it anymore. And it's going to be one of those deficiencies. I know people that do that have no relationship. So it's not that they couldn't do anything. Nobody wants to be around them, right? Nobody wants to call them up on the phone. Hey, you want to go somewhere? Oh, no. For the 9th person in a row?
No, I'd rather die. No, that's true. And I think so when people look at wealth in general, their first response is to think money. But you're saying it's all these things, and if they're having a deficiency in money, it's one of those other things. And a lot of times, if you're having a deficiency in relationships, it's one of those other things.
That's true.
Or deficiency in energy.
You just have to know which one of them it is. Now, I'll tell you this: like when I was a kid, there was this philosophy that I read a lot of books on some sort of ancient philosophers, and they were contemplating some financial things before there was financial systems. And then you had, I got familiar with interest, like appreciation and values. And when I was a kid, I was thinking, so the bank, if you give them money, they will give you money for giving them money. Right. And I thought this was an amazing concept. I'll give them $100. And when they give me 20 cents, I'll just live on the 20 cents. I'll never use my dollar. I'll just put it in there and then it'll give me free money. And I thought that was the most amazing concept. And it became silly because I thought, well, things cost way more than the interest that you put out there. But I was wrong. I talked myself out of that. If I'd have figured out to stay within my means and only spend what I was creating on the positive side of things, like that would have solved the finances thing. It would have solved the relationships thing, because you would have never been consuming relationships. They would have always got +1, and there's no way to run out when you're, I'll give you another example. We use this philosophy to clean out our cars, right? So I don't like having a messy car. I hate clutter. It's terrible to me. And so my philosophy is that I will take, if I put something in my car, I have to take +1 out of my car when I leave, right? So if I bring 5 things out, I at least have to bring a 6th thing out at the end of the day. And you will literally run out of things. You'll be like, is there any fuzz that I could take out of here with me?
Yeah, no, that's so good. So, so we're saying there are 4 areas to being a wealthy person. In one of that's finances.
Yes.
One of that is energy. One of that is time, and one of that is relationships. So let's see how far we get. But let's try and tackle each of these areas. Not necessarily.
Which do you consider the hard one, though? By the way, I want to know from your perspective, what do you think is the most dynamic or the most complicated?
For me personally, relationships come very naturally. I have a high emotional EQ. I enjoy people. That's always been one I've had a surplus in. I've never had to dig too far for them, if that makes sense. Energy ebbs and flows in seasons. You're using the term energy like passion. And I think my wiring is I'm more excited at the beginning of something. I love the dream phase. I love the implementation in the beginning. And then I want to pass it off to somebody else that's going to put the tactical stuff in place and has the gusto to follow through. And I want to move on to my next idea. That's just my wiring, though.
Okay.
So I have energy in the beginning of things, but then I will fizzle towards the middle or the end. And I'm looking for people that are like, hey, we can do this and we'll succeed here. And I'm like, great, why don't you run with that? I'm going to go on to the next idea. And then for me, I think the season I'm in right now, I'm figuring out the financial piece for my wife and I, for the church. Like everything I'm reading right now. I just got Chris Hogan's book, Everyday Millionaires and stuff like that. And I'm just want to be in a different mindset. And I want to start doing things in my life that makes sense in a financial sense, not just because I have to, not because I made a decision to buy something so now I have to pay that, but I want to be in a position where I'm living from the surplus and not just to get to zero.
All right. Well, I honestly think I've kind of watched how you've gone through this. And the first step for you was using your language and talking about money and finances without talking about it like everybody else does.
Right.
I mean, that's first. If you find yourself saying the same cliches that other people do, right, you're speaking the language. So that's number one. You usher in more finances to yourself when you have a place to put it. I mean, do you if you've not made a bed for that thing to lie in, it's not ready to come to you because, I mean, you're not serious enough to put a bed for it, right?
It's good. We've used that illustration. Somebody wants to be married, but they're still living like a bachelor.
It's exactly right.
Like you prepare yourself for the season.
And I feel that's what you're doing right now. You're really preparing all of your environments. And I'm not just saying your bank account. Your bank account is not the place 100%. Where money lives, right?
Yep.
You know, we look at it. We've used this example a bunch of time. Funnels, right? You're setting up an orchestrated number of funnels and pipes that move things to different places, and it cycles back through and dumps into itself, and it grows in volume.
Yeah, I think the biggest threat in finances is the idea of I have to accumulate, because people think that way. But I'm not accumulating. It's just passing through.
Yeah, I don't accumulate shit.
As long as I get to touch it.
Doug and I'm not swimming in a pile of money back here. If it comes in, I want to get rid of it as quick as possible and put it through the machine, because if the machine gets idle, it changes and it becomes a different machine. So you got to keep things flowing through it, just like water in the pipes.
It's good. So yeah, I would say for me right now, and that's the area I'm kind of focused on, the finance side of things.
So give me one more on this, because this is like the bookend part that I haven't talked too much about, but let's do it, live in front of other people here.
Love it.
Now the celebration and the enjoyment after it's been done, because it's been such the carrot, and the carrot is what keeps you motivated. You're not picturing yourself doing something with it. Like you want the contraption, you know that you're going to create it, but can you really picture yourself being able to do whatever you want with it, light it on fire and not care about it? But that's the bookend.
You are the scene in Batman where the Joker has that pile of money and he lights it on fire. That is me.
Yes, right. Mayhem is my name. But no, I mean, you're going to go through the steps where you talk about it differently. You're going to create places to put it and create the machinery that creates more of it.
Well, it's amazing, to talk about that for a minute. So we bought the new house, right? And that was a whole process in language and faith that you and I talked through, and how do we navigate that, and being able to see it before it was ours, and then we had to be able to sell ours, and going through that process of visualizing that. And we talked on the show. I cleaned out my basement, not because my realtor said so, but I had this thought that, like, hey, my house will sell if I clean out my basement. So I cleaned out the basement, took pictures. We added new pictures to the thing, and within a week or two, it sold. Now, whether it was because of the basement or not, I don't know.
Doesn't matter.
Exactly. It's old. Yes. But at the end of the day, I think we stepped into the new house, and I kept saying to my wife, we kept having these conversations where she would say something along the lines, well, like, yeah, that's nice. I want to do that, but we don't have money for that. And I'm like, yes, we do. And I was trying to, yes, it's not in our bank account, but we have the money for that. And for her, it was like, not computing. And I kept saying, like, just because the zeros aren't there for us to go and spend $20,000 and remodel 2 bathrooms doesn't mean the money's not there. And once we've created a place for money, like you're talking about, we had the projects lined up. We knew what we wanted to do. We set that stuff aside. It's amazing how all the stuff came in. I don't know. It wasn't too many shows ago. I was talking about how I wanted a sectional. I've talked about it. I picked the sectional out. I knew the one that I wanted. All that stuff. And it's amazing. Guess what I have?
A sectional.
Sectional comes in 2 weeks.
Okay, so you got to talk yourself into it. Like you're taking an abstract concept that not many people can latch into. Let me put it in a material sense, right? You get a jar, dollar bill. I'm going to put a dollar bill in a jar, 365, and I have $365. I'm going to go out there and enjoy in some way that's going to inspire me to do something. Now, on day one, do you have $1 in there? Or do you have 365? Now, if you trust yourself and you know you're just going to follow through all the way to fruition, you've got 365. It's already there because it's there. The math works out. You can picture it. All you got to do is go through the dollar thing every day. And on today's date, a year from now, there's $365 in there. Yeah. There's nothing abstract about it. Yeah. But when you say, I'm going to buy a house, you're thinking like there's 5,000 different attachments and opportunities. It's better than the jar. There are way more things that can happen other than $365 being in there. Yeah. Why can't that excite you in the same way where it could be millions of dollars worth of opportunity that came just by that house?
And I think part of the battle is vocabulary for people around each of these items, but particularly finance. And then as you move past the vocabulary and you start to have that space done, then it's just a matter of what your maximum amount is that you think is possible.
Exactly.
And then it becomes a stretching. Then it becomes, well, how do I put myself around that much money so I'm comfortable with it? How do I remember the first time I held $1 million. We had an insurance claim at the last church I served at. The building burnt down and we got a $1.4 million settlement or whatever. And the executive pastor called me and said, would you like to hold $1 million? And he put the $1 million check in my hand. It was the first time I ever held $1 million. It was kind of cool. And he, we were being funny with it or whatever. And the bank across the street, for whatever reason, would just cash checks for me. Didn't matter if they were made out to me or not. So I was like, I'm going to go across the street to the bank. I'll be right back.
Get one. I'll take it one.
Yeah, we had a good laugh about that. But it was like one of my first weeks in the office. He gave me a check for a lunch I was going to that was made out to somebody else, and then a check for something else that was made out to somebody else that I was going to drop off. And I took it with another check and went to the bank, gave them all 3 checks. They gave me all the cash back, and he's getting ready to leave for vacation. I go, hey, where are those checks for the lunch? And he goes, I already gave them to you. I'm like, well, the bank cashed them and gave them to me. He goes, they weren't made out to you. And so that was always the running joke in the office. But when you get around and you start holding and you start in a very physical sense, and you get around other people that are dealing and making deals of 10,000 and 100,000, and they just, those people start to think differently and they start to rub off on you, and not by osmosis, but I do a thing at church. You can it's brought, caught, and taught. I can teach somebody on a spreadsheet, this is how it works, but some things are just caught. Some things, like, you get around somebody and you just start catching their verbiage and you catch their vibe and you catch, that sort of stuff. And, I think when you start getting around it, you become comfortable with it, and then you can start visualizing it. For a lot of people, they don't have the vision muscle to see themselves, and so they have to be shown first. They have to, what is it like to have $100,000? I don't know. Well, let me demonstrate this for you. In ministry, we do this often. So, like, you want kids ministry to go a certain way, or you want a certain department in your, company to go a certain way. You find somebody who's doing it the way that you want it done, or has something that you want, and you go and expose your team to it. So that way, hey, we're going to come back and we're going to import this part of their culture into our culture. Or, did you see the way they did that? All right. Every time I'm in a church, I'm walking around taking pictures like, oh man, that's a great idea. Yeah, we should totally do that. That streamlines that process. Or really like the way the layout of their lobby makes a ton more sense than ours. Well, maybe we should flip flop. But it's that sort of stuff that lets you glean. But people are afraid to do that financially because people are all like uptight about their finances, or they're embarrassed or whatever on their own personal level. So I think the vocabulary is huge, but then you have to be comfortable talking about and visualizing the amounts and where you want to go and what kind of course you want to chart for
Yeah,
yourself.
and you'll trust yourself if you do that, but don't like move the needle and talk about an amount that you really don't trust yourself that you can go get. Here was a strategy that I did early on, and this is when I was stupid with money, and it was one of the earliest things that worked because I had a whole life that I was embarrassed about, but there was a couple segments in there I was doing okay. And the theory was that if you have, if you were asked, if I gave you an hour and then you came and asked me for another hour, all I'd ask you is how'd you spend the last hour that I gave you, right? Until you can tell me that I got good value for that hour, I'm probably not going to give you another one. So the first one was a car payment. Like we had a car payment that was way bigger than we should have. And so we busted our ass to get this thing paid off but then once we already knew that money was going to a car payment, when the car payment wasn't there anymore, we had to think of something really smart to do with what was a part of that car payment, because it was intelligent, it was grounded in work and something we were proud of. So my 80% of my life was jacked up, but that 20%, I was really proud of it, and I rolled that into it and tried to grow that one. It's almost like the opposite of cancer. Cancer takes bad material and it infects good material. Well, this was good material and it was affecting bad material in that way. And I grew things up sort of like by decimal point rather than exponent. Exponent got too big too fast, but I knew that like if I knew that I could go get $1, the next step was 10, and the next step was 100, and the next step was 1,000. And there were times when I was doing deposits, I was depositing $200 a week. And then I was depositing regularly $2,000 a week. And then I was depositing $20,000 per week. And I was like, holy shit, I mean, this is even a possible thing just if you wrap your around those small incremental steps that get you there. Yeah.
So you have two different mindsets of people. You have the people that don't mind the abstract and the dreaming, and then you have the bean counter, so to speak, the people that are into the nuts and bolts. How does the financial side and growing into wealth work? Because you need both. You got a budget. You can't outpunt your coverage. You need to be smart, but you also have to be willing to take risk. It's one of the only ways to grow and to faith is the down deposit for the things that are to come. And so if we don't step out and risk, it's difficult. But so how do you marry those two? Because obviously,
good word that you use, because that's exactly what you need to do, is you need to marry a person with those instincts. Because I'm telling you that there isn't anything in this world that is totally good or totally bad. It is literally, somebody has to balance and counterbalance every action. So if you're a good idea creator, you need a really solid counterweight to what you're doing. Or even if you have great intentions, you're going to be dangerous to the world around you. Somebody's got to keep you in check. And that's from the best intentions to the worst intentions.
Yeah. So you need to marry those people. So it's good that I have my wife who is a budgeter and a bean counter and loves to tell me no. And then she needs me just as much as I need her to continue to stretch and to push the boundaries of, hey, this is what we're going to do.
You can see if you do nothing but entropy and chaos, right? You can't build a village with entropy. It's lots of energy. You have great stuff that happens, but you will never be able to enjoy anything because you'll constantly be defending it. And then the other side of it is going to be atrophy. When you have no movement and you have no energy, you just stay exactly where you're at. So I hope you're happy, because that's where you're going to be in 20 years from now. You need both of them to move you, but then make solid, and then move you some more, and then make solid.
Interesting. So on the wealth side of things, it's a vocabulary issue. It's a mindset issue. Are there any mechanical issues to generating?
That is the least valuable part of it, and everybody thinks that's the most valuable. I use a spreadsheet and calculate my paycheck and where I put it and what investments I have. I've never made lots of wealth based on mathematics. I really haven't. It's been self-control. It's about processes and systems, and then following through with what I intend to do. And I'm telling you, I've even followed through on really dumb shit for the sake of not breaking the stride on what I decide. So I trust myself. When I do something really good, I'll follow through and not like question it, like, is that something I should be doing?
So the mechanics don't really matter.
It really doesn't. No.
Interesting.
And if you're filled on all four of those departments, it takes care of itself. You don't have to brute force it. You only have to brute force it if you're trying to, like, you're at a deficit and now you got to spend a Saturday morning cleaning out your car rather than letting the attrition of the math work through. You do +1 in all those departments and it takes care of itself.
All right.
Was that too abstract?
No.
All right.
That was good. Let's shift gears into another department. So that's the financial department. and you said relationships is the most important one. In case we run out of time, let's jump to relationships. So energy, time, finances, relationship. Those are the four kind of pillars that Joe's been talking about that build wealth. Relationships. Is that just people to people? Is that networking? Do I need business cards for that? What do relationships look like? What are you talking about in that sense? Are we talking about, the mailman that I meet? Are we talking about the deep relationships? Do I have to be an extrovert to be good at relationships? How does that work?
So I should be asking you this question because you are my go-to relationship. If I have a deficit, it's here. And I've struggled, with quite a bit of years trying to put this together and marry what I'm naturally good at with keeping relationships healthy. I grew up in tons of really bad relationships. So I got used to, like, your family was about finances. My family was about relationships. So I'm really having a successful day if I'm at zero. Right. I'm probably not adding a +1 in any given day. Yeah. But as long as I'm not injuring people or burning bridges or whatever, and my feelings get hurt a lot doing this. Like it's a hard thing to not be good at this because you're dead to it, but then you pay attention to it and then it hurts your feelings a lot.
Yeah. No, I understand that on the financial end. I get frustrated with myself that way. So I would say for me, I feel like with the relationship side of things, I find myself always trying to pass people off to other people, not because I don't have time, but I find so much joy in being that funnel to say, oh, you need to connect with so-and-so. Like, you guys would hit it off.
Meets the definition.
Like, it totally, for me, fills my tank.
Most people, that would be a deficit. To you, that is a positive.
Oh, it totally... builds me up. And so when I meet somebody new at church and they're like, oh, it just happened this weekend. There's a newer family's been coming the last couple of weeks. And the lady was saying to me that they homeschool. And I'm like, oh, you need to meet Patty. Patty homeschooled for 25 years. She could probably tell you some tricks of the trade and places that she got stuff. And the two of them got together, traded numbers. And I'm like, yeah. And I love to see the fruit of a relationship like that. I had a meeting with a pastor today. I was sharing our Church Center app. He was all excited to hear about it. And then I was asking him about ministry. What did you get into? And he started mentioning some thoughts and vision and needs they have. And I was like, you know what? I might just have to, if this tickles Joe's fancy, this might be a spot that Joe would really love to, be a part of. Maybe we could partner on something. And to me, those are the relational wins. It's not about I have 15 friends and Joe has 2 friends. That's not what we're talking about. Right. And the same thing in the finances. It's not saying, well, you have $15 and I have 15,000. That's not necessarily what we're talking about. Wealth is measured, from relationships, that you have the people around you that you're supposed to have around you. And you want to have an inner circle and you want to have others as well. And you want to be networking. For me, I love to help other people build their circles is probably the best definition in that. So I love to make connections. I love to, hey, why don't you come to lunch and you come to lunch and we'll all have a party. And sometimes that blows up in my face because you bring people and you're like, well, they were oil and water. That I totally misread that.
Well, my relationships were so bad that I could have like sporting event Browns tickets, right? Yeah. And it would take me 97 calls for somebody to say, and I don't know if it was the Browns were so bad or I was so bad, but I'm taking.
Let's go Browns.
Right.
Let's go Browns. We're going to speak positively about that. Let's go Browns.
Yeah. But now I feel like life is a little easier that I don't think I would, even things that are not enjoyable. If I needed something moved in my driveway, I would almost feel bad because I have like 70 people that would line up that would help me with that. And I don't want to have anybody help me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
No.
I heard early on from a mentor, leaders never do anything by themselves. Anytime you look at Jesus, the only time he withdraws to be by himself, he's not actually being by himself. He's going to pray and talk to his Father, and in that sense. But everywhere else, he took 2 disciples with him, 3 disciples, 12 disciples, a crowd. He was always with people because as a leader, I'm always trying to transfer those things. It's one of the things that's actually been more difficult, I think, as a lead pastor than it actually was as a youth pastor. Young adults and teenagers, they got a lot of expendable time. So it was easy to be like, hey, the house is open anytime. Right. Come on over. I had parents that were like, do you want their social security card and their birth certificate? Because they're at your house all the time. And I didn't have any kids. And so certain things were easier. Now as adults, like, all right, I got to schedule that in. I can fit you in 3 weeks from now on, at midnight, if you can make it work. and that challenge of time, which will be the next space that we'll go, really feeds into the relationship side of things, because you spell love Time, and most people have only a little bit of time, and they're going to spend chunk of that with their family, and they should, but to build and blossom and have relationships that are meaningful, it just takes an investment. It takes coffee, and it takes I sat with this pastor today. We hadn't spent a ton of time. We'd see each other at events and say hi or whatever, and but I think we sat for almost 2 hours just talking life and ministry, and he got done. He was like, "Thank you so much for your time." Like, it was so refreshing for him. And for me, I'm thinking of who are the 3 people I can help connect him with to expand his circle. Cause that's just, I don't know, my gift, I guess, my gift set. When 9 times out of 10, when I'm meeting somebody, I'm like, can I pass them to Joe for business stuff? Like that. Oh, you would totally, Travis is doing work at my house, and I know you guys met, and I'm like, man, like if I can cross pollinate some of these people and they get together and it works, then some of them aren't going to work, but if it works, man, like what a home run for Joe, for Travis, for this pastor.
And I truly believe that some of our deficiencies make us more compatible with relationships, because if we were all good at all this stuff already, then we'd be less needed with other people. Because I feel like, and this is epiphany just hit me.
That's real good.
So I know that I was not great at just walking a room and talking to people.
Yeah.
Right. And this happened with 3 people in my life. I had one of my mentors in radio. Like, we would go around these places and he knew everybody and would shake hands and introduce me. I'm like, man, I really wish I could do that. Then one of my business partners, we'd go around and he knew everybody, shake hands, whatever. Like, man, I really wish I could do that. Then we have you that I wish I could go around and I'm like, wait a minute. The connection with those people are the extension of the relationship connection that I needed. So I didn't need to be good at it. I needed to be good to you so that you could fill that in for me.
Well, it's the same thing at church. I can't write a check for everything that we do, but those people that call Bridge of Hope home and the relationships they built allow them to go out. I said just this past week, some of you, your gift to the kingdom of God is you're going to start businesses and you're going to make money and you are going to fund people getting fed and God doing all the things that he wants to do in the valley. But unfortunately in the church, and the point that I made was like, we celebrate the guitar player on the platform and I was like, man, he's so gifted. But the guy going and busting his butt 70 hours a week and building a business in the community and relationships and all that stuff is going to impact the kingdom of God just as much as the guitar player standing up there offering worship to God. He just happens to worship with his wrenches or with his computer.
I consider that equal.
Exactly.
Absolutely equal.
100%.
There was like 5 light bulb moments in this one conversation. This was a good one.
This was good. Earlier today, I was like, we're going to talk about wealth because Joe's mentioned it 2 or 3 times, which means it's fresh in you. Time. How do you manage your time? Because you're getting, I have 4 kids. I have a wife. I got a house. I pastor a church. We do a podcast. I have opportunities to do various things. How do you manage it all? I mean, you got lots of different ventures. You're going on Gus the Bus in a week.
Yep.
How do you navigate all that and make time for relationships, make time to earn extra income, make time for your passions? How do you do that?
So unlike the examples with finance, let's just take like what is a win in that? Like if in my world, X amount of dollars would be a win, or being able to stay up till 10 o'clock and work that entire time would be an energy win. Yeah. In relationships, being able to, anything that I would need, I know that I have a person, and anything that I have, I know that I have a person. But this one's, it's infinite, right? But it feels very limited when you experience it. So what would be a win? Like what would make you feel like you have more time than you could ever need?
For me, I always manage time from 2 spots, and we've talked about this, but I always try and go priorities. Those things that are most important are going to happen and take precedent, and if other stuff falls off, it is what it is. Because as much as time is infinite, it's also finite, and at some point, you and I will die. At some point, the sun will go down. Like certain things will.
Well, when I say infinite, I've never asked a person if yesterday they didn't waste some time. So if they wasted time, then they obviously had enough, and it would mean that it's infinite. So I'm going to tell you, okay, use a little bit more productive time, something you really want to do. When you run out, let me know. And I've never been said, hey, you know what? I finally filled up my entire day. I can always go through and find out something that you wasted, something that you didn't really want to do. Yeah. So it's infinite forever that you can keep clawing back. And what the thing that happens is when you claw it back, you compress it. Okay. So you had a job where you had a lunch hour, right? And on your lunch hour, you could go to get gas in your car or go get something to eat and whatever, right? If you did those same 3 things when it wasn't your lunch hour, how long would it take? It would take you freaking 3 hours to do something you really know could take an hour. So that is the expansion. If you could figure out to always pretend like it was your lunch hour, the things that don't matter, try to compress it down so it doesn't take quite as long. Now you just created a little bit extra time.
And you multitask and you get 100%. Rick Warren talks about time, and he says that if you're running out of time or you feel like you don't have enough time or you're always overbooked, you're either doing something that you weren't designed to do, that you're outside of that will and purpose of God, if you will, or you're mismanaging the priorities and the things that God's given you to do. Some of it, I think, is a mismanagement of energy and passion too. So like at church right now, one of the things I'm trying to do is I'm trying to release people into their giftings. You were in our business and finance meeting and you made the statement, and it was like for me, you were like, well, in my company, anything below $250, I just empower somebody and they can cancel that. Like, I don't need to have a conversation about it. And it doesn't necessarily have to be $250 for the church, but there needs to be some sort of financial threshold that I never have to have a conversation about. And right now everything flows through me. And so I'm feeling like, man, I don't have time to do this. I don't have time to do that. But if I start releasing the relationships, the people that have those skill sets to do some of the administration and some of this stuff, then I can do the things that I'm built to do. And all of a sudden I'm going to have time. It's going to be
you could create
wild.
Time. That's why it's infinite. You can keep compressing it and decompressing it as it's important to you. And I literally want to take the things that aren't really important and spend the least amount of time and energy on things that aren't important. And I want to expand that into the things that are most important. I want to be able to drill most amount of resources and energy into them.
So we hit finances, we hit relationship, and we hit time briefly. Let's look at the last one, which is energy. And we only have a few minutes, but so relationships, finance, time, they all have their parameters. Energy, you kind of are defining that as passion, it sounds like.
It's sort of. Think of it as the fuel that makes you do something.
Yeah.
Okay, so my wife and I, we have this we have this thing, if we're too tired and we want something that's downstairs, I won't do it myself. But if she wants it, right, I'll go do it, right? So the fuel would be that relationship is way more important than my wants. And right. You first get a car and you want to go to the grocery store. You want to drive everywhere because it's fresh and it's new and whatever. And now you're like, can I put that off? Right. Yeah. So that's the fuel. You let the fuel, the excitement about owning a car and whatever diminish over time. And it's not as exciting.
So it's a little bit of the inspiration, motivation, passion, all of that kind of rolled into one.
Yeah.
So how, for those folks out there that are, what increases energy and what decreases energy for Joe? What are those things that get you up in the morning? You're like, let's go. And then what are the things you're like, oh dear God, I have to do this?
And it's a conversion deal. Remember I talked about the loan payment where I felt good about this little thing and I was more likely to put attention into things that made me feel good. And if you look around your environments and it makes you feel like crap when you look at stuff, you got to change environments first. So if you walk into a room that's full of clutter and it saps you of that energy to want to do anything, so redo it. Like spend the weekend and make your environments more appealing to you. So when you walk into a room, everything in there calls you to start doing stuff with it. Fill it with stuff that you like. I mean, so many people's houses they have things in there that they don't interact with and doesn't inspire them. You can walk around and I can tell you a story about every fixture, every piece of furniture, everything that's in there. And if it's not inspiring me, it's out of there.
Gone. So environment, I love that. Atmosphere has a huge to do with passion and energy and all of that. So you create environments, atmospheres for yourself that generate energy so that you feel productive, so you feel like getting up and doing those things.
So let's convert one of those. Yeah. Okay, so all of us, we don't really want to drive places. What would we have to do environmentally in our place, in our car, to want to say, oh, it's 2:00 in the morning, I get to go down into my car? What could we possibly do to create something exciting about wanting to get in the car and go?
The two things I love about my car, you're going to make fun of me, are one, I usually get on the phone. It's relationship time.
Okay.
Almost immediately, it's a 15-minute drive here. So I usually on the way home, I'll call my mom because she's just out of work. Hey, Ma, how was your day? Nothing crazy, just trying to make a deposit, call one of my brothers, stuff like that. So for me, getting in the car is like, oh, peace, quiet, no kids. I'm usually by myself. I can make a phone call. Or it's invest in me time, podcast, something I enjoy, usually on the way here. So on the way home, I make phone calls. On the way here, I'm usually listening to Mr. Shapiro, who is subbed in by Michael Knowles today. But so for me, those are the two things that I love about getting in my car. When I was in college, you couldn't have any alone time because you were in a dorm with, multiple people in your room. And then even the common areas, there are always people there. So the only private space you had was either go for a walk or get in your car. So a lot of times to pray or just to think, I would just go sit in my car and close the door because I was by myself. So I think you can create an environment that brings passion.
And I know I put you on the spot for ideas, but let me give you something that makes me tick as far as cars. I love tech. I don't know if you know this.
Yeah.
I like buttons that light up and switches and stuff like that. So I'm constantly in a pursuit of adding a new thing in there, piques my interest, and then I want to be in that environment because I want to play with the little toys. So it's a little carrot that I put in there. That's I buy a lot of new cars. I like the stuff that I buy. It keeps me wanting to drive around. If it was boring and it was stupid and whatever, I wouldn't want to do it. And then you wouldn't see me on the road 12 hours a day, grinding it out and stuff like that. To keep me motivated, I got to put the stuff I like in my places.
That's good. And you do. And if you walk around the studio here, or I know at your house, you're doing some stuff now, and I'm sure it's going to be, even your theater space all had your favorite movies. And you sit there and tell me about each one of them.
Yeah, right.
Which we still haven't watched, The Astronaut Farmer. We got to do a movie thing coming up. I know we're going to do that.
Totally.
Couple of weeks here. We got to do that once you guys get back.
Maybe we'll set up a screen and we'll do it outside. We'll have a nice outdoor movie night.
Yeah, the kids will like that. That'll be fun. Cool. Well, we are out of time. We are over.
We slayed it, man.
This was a great conversation. Probably need to expand on each of these, maybe a show on each one: time, energy, relationships, and finances. But if you want to be wealthy, it's not just about money, although that, for me, that's my area of focus right now. Joe was saying his area of deficit's relationship, but for each of us, you may be passion. Maybe you're just struggling because you're in the same job you've always been in, or maybe you're feeling like you don't have a lot of time. You've overextended on your commitments. Wealth comes in a lot of different facets. It's not just about one of those areas, but all four working together. We hope you enjoyed the Joe and Doug Show. We'll see you back here on Tuesday.
Thank you for listening to this show on Youngstown Studio. If you like our programming, we invite you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, follow our Facebook page, or subscribe to your favorite podcast platform like iTunes or Spotify. This is original Youngstown content, and we would appreciate you sharing the videos and the word.